All right, so get ready
All right.
for a deep dive into some seriously fascinating stuff.
Oh.
You sent us a single sheet of vellum
Oh.
containing 4 spells.
Right.
All about binding fairies.
Fairies.
And not just any fairies.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
talking about 7 fairy sisters.
Wow. Okay.
Now you might be thinking
All right.
fairies.
Hey.
Sounds a bit whimsical.
Right.
But hold on, because this deep dive is going to take you
Okay.
way beyond Tinkerbell
All right.
and fairy dust.
Okay.
What's immediately captivating about these spells,
Yeah.
dating back to around 1600,
Wow.
is that they're standalone,
Interesting.
not tucked away in a larger grimoire,
Yeah.
which is a fancy word for a magician's spell book,
Right.
or a book of shadows, a collection of magical knowledge.
Right.
Someone went through the trouble of carefully copying these onto this single sheet of vellum.
Wow.
Why?
Right.
What was so special about these particular spells?
Yeah. And here's where we start to see how this deep dive is anything but ordinary.
Right.
The way that these spells blend
Okay.
elements of fairy lore with practices you'd usually find in demon summoning.
Okay.
Well, that tells us a lot
Yeah.
about how magic was perceived
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
practiced back
Oh,
then.
right. Exactly.
Most people today
Yeah.
associate fairies with lighthearted mischief,
Okay.
like
yeah.
those little tricksters
Yeah.
who might steal your keys
Uh-huh.
or lead you astray in the woods.
Right.
But in early modern England,
Okay.
the picture was much more complex.
We're talking about a time when folks genuinely believed in the power of fairies,
Yeah.
and they weren't always seen as benevolent beings.
No.
In
Yeah,
fact,
they could be downright dangerous.
dangerous.
Think about the witchcraft trials, for instance.
Right.
Fairies pop up quite a bit in those accounts,
Hmm.
sometimes as familiars,
Okay.
those supernatural companions assisting witches,
Okay.
or even as demonic figures,
Wow.
demanding favors from humans.
We're not talking about granting wishes here.
Are we?
Not exactly.
And one scholar, Reginald Scott,
Okay.
even suggested in his book, Discuary of Witchcraft.
That fairies might be demonic in nature.
Wow!
Or at least easily mistaken for demons.
So right from the start, we have this blurring.
Of the lines between
Yeah.
fairies and those darker forces.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
We have to address the elephant in the room.
okay.
Or should we say,
Uh-huh.
the fairy in the forest?
The topic of fairy sex.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
In traditional fairy lore,
Right.
it's often the fairies
Yeah.
who initiate sexual encounters with humans.
Okay.
We see this in those captivating tales of fairy abductions,
Yeah.
those stories about mortals lured into the fairy realm,
Right.
or the folklore motif of the animal bride,
Uh-huh.
where a human might trap a fairy
Okay.
for various purposes,
Right.
often for sex,
Uh,
wealth,
Yeah.
or even magical offspring.
And those stories always seem to highlight the importance
Of secrecy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you reveal the fairy's true nature,
Uh-huh.
the whole deal is off.
Precisely.
It was all about maintaining control,
Okay.
ensuring the human had the upper hand in the relationship.
Right.
But here's where our spells on this vellum really stand out.
Okay.
It's the mage who is actively pursuing the fairy.
Interesting.
Not just any fairy,
Mm-hmm.
but one named Lilia.
So what's the catch?
Is this like an epic fairy romance? Does our mage whisk Lilia away to a magical realm?
Not quite.
These spells include very specific instructions
Okay.
on how to banish the fairy afterward.
What?
This isn't about happily ever after.
Interesting.
It's about a very specific
Uh,
and temporary encounter.
all right. So we have to ask ourselves.
Right.
Why would a mage risk the potential dangers
Of fairy magic.
Yeah.
For what seems to be,
A fleeting dalliance.
especially when these fairies, as we've
No,
established,
aren't exactly the Disney version. Right.
It is. It's almost like he's placing an order
Okay.
for a very specific experience.
and that's where we start to uncover
Okay.
some of the scribe's motivations
Yeah.
and desires.
Okay.
Because these spells offer some pretty intriguing benefits, shall we say,
Okay.
beyond just the encounter itself.
All right. Spill the fairy tea.
What's so special about Lilia?
Well, the spell goes into great detail
Okay.
about her beauty,
Uh-huh.
her bounty,
Okay.
and repeatedly emphasizes.
Her perpetual virginity,
Now, that's a detail you don't see every day.
especially in a spell from the 1600s.
It's a fascinating detail, isn't it?
And it hints at several things.
Okay.
First, it suggests she's always receptive
Right.
and perhaps represents a kind of safety and control
Okay.
that wasn't always associated with human women
Right.
at the time.
Okay.
No risk of pregnancy disease
Yeah.
or a demanding wife,
Okay.
to put it bluntly.
So Lilia offers a certain level of convenience, let's say,
Yeah.
that a human woman might not.
You get the sense that this mage is looking for something very specific.
And there's another element here that we have to acknowledge, even if it makes us a bit uncomfortable.
Uh-oh.
The text subtly hints
Okay.
that the scribe might be using this fairy conquest
Right.
to bolster his own sense of masculinity and power.
Wow.
It's a way of demonstrating control over a potentially dangerous being,
Yeah.
showcasing his magical prowess.
It's almost like he's ticking off a box.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Conquered a fairy? Check.
In a sense, yes.
And it's important to note
Okay.
that while the spell does mention the possibility of gaining knowledge from Lilia
Right.
after the, shall we say, hot main event.
The overwhelming emphasis throughout
Right.
is on the physical encounter.
So we can be pretty certain that the scribe
Is deeply invested in the sexual aspect
Oh,
of
right.
this encounter.
Yeah.
It's not just about knowledge.
Right.
Or power.
Yeah.
There's something more personal.
More visceral
Uh-huh.
driving him.
And then, of course...
There's that detail.
Oh.
The spell very specifically tells you to go to bed naked.
Wow.
I'll let you, the listener, ponder.
Who that says more about.
It's certainly a detail that raises eyebrows
Yeah.
even centuries later.
But it also speaks to the level of detail
Right.
and intentionality
Yeah.
present in these spells.
This isn't just about a quick fling.
Okay.
The scribe has clearly thought this through, crafted the encounter with a specific goal in mind.
And speaking of details...
There's something else that stands out.
Okay.
In the language the scribe uses to describe Lilia,
Uh-huh.
he repeatedly refers to her as a woman,
Okay.
and the way he underlines that word.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you wonder if there's a more complex understanding.
Of gender and desire
Yeah.
at play here than we might expect
Uh-huh.
from a 17th century text.
It certainly suggests a deeper level of fascination,
Okay.
and perhaps even a longing
Yeah.
for something beyond the ordinary.
So we're seeing hints that this encounter with Lilia...
It's about more than just a physical act.
Right.
There's an element of seeking power,
Uh-huh.
of proving masculinity,
Yeah.
but also perhaps...
A desire for connection.
Yeah,
For
okay.
something beyond the mundane reality
Mhm.
of the scribe's life.
This begs the question,
Yeah.
why this kind of encounter?
Yeah.
What was so alluring about a fairy lover specifically
Right.
that would lead him to such lengths?
And why choose a fairy over, say, a human woman?
That's an excellent question.
And I think to answer it,
Okay.
we need to look at the broader context of magic and desire
Uh-huh.
in the 17th century.
Right.
Remember how we talked about those practices of
Yeah.
demon summoning?
Uh-huh.
Well, those spells often focused on...
Human women
Okay.
into having sex with the mage.
So perhaps fairies offered a different kind of dynamic. One that was less fraught with danger
All right.
and societal repercussions.
Okay, so instead of potentially facing a jealous husband,
Or accusations of impropriety,
Right.
a fairy offered a certain...
level of control and safety.
Exactly.
Demons were unpredictable, volatile beings
Right.
associated with immense power and risk.
Right.
Fairies, though, viewed as potentially harmful,
Right.
were considered more controllable,
Okay.
especially when bound by the right spells.
Right.
Plus, there's that undeniable allure,
Of the otherworldly.
a taste of the forbidden.
A romance with a being
Yeah.
from beyond the realm of human experience.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like stepping into a fairy tale.
But with potentially dangerous consequences.
And for someone like a cleric or a scholar
Right.
living in a primarily male environment,
Right.
a fairy lover might have felt less risky
Yeah.
than engaging with a human woman.
Okay.
No societal repercussions.
Right.
No whispers of scandal.
So are we starting to see a pattern here?
The desire for control.
Uh-huh.
The fascination with the otherworldly.
Yeah.
The potential anxieties surrounding relationships with human women.
It seems like this encounter with Lilia
Right.
might be less about the fairy herself
Mm-hmm.
and more about what she represents.
That's a very insightful observation.
No, I think you're right.
These spells are offering us a glimpse
Yeah.
into a complex web of desires and anxieties.
And to fully unravel them,
Okay.
we need to dive even deeper into the mind of the scribe
Right.
and the world he inhabited.
Remember how we were talking about
Yeah.
those anxieties
Yeah.
surrounding female power
Right.
in the 17th century?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's playing a significant role here as well.
Oh.
These spells
Right.
and the scribe's desires
Yeah.
aren't just happening in a vacuum.
They're deeply intertwined with the social fabric of the time.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Help me connect those dots.
Okay.
How did these spells reflect?
Those anxiety.
Think about the position of women in society back then.
Okay.
They were often viewed
Mhm.
as a potential source of chaos,
Well.
able to disrupt the established order.
Okay.
They could make demands,
Right.
refuse advances,
Yeah.
even accuse men of wrongdoing.
So you're saying that in a world where men
Held most of the power,
uh-huh
women represented a certain level
unpredictability.
of force that could challenge their authority.
Precisely.
And fairies,
Right.
particularly one bound by powerful magic,
Yeah.
offered a way to sidestep all of that.
Wow. Okay.
A fairy couldn't reject the mage,
Yes.
make claims on him,
Uh-huh.
or threaten his reputation.
It's almost as if he's crafted.
The ideal woman,
Yeah.
beautiful, compliant,
Uh-huh.
and always available,
Right.
with none of the societal baggage or potential consequences that
Wow.
came with interacting with a human woman.
That's a really astute observation.
It speaks to a desire
Yeah.
for a level of control and security
Right.
that was often absent
Uh-huh.
in relationships with human women.
But I'm also sensing
That it's not just about control.
right.
Yeah.
There's also that element of longing
Yeah.
for something extraordinary,
Yeah.
something beyond the
Mm.
realm of everyday experience.
Absolutely.
And that's where those anxieties
Okay.
about female power
Uh-huh.
and the desire for control
Yeah.
intersects with something far more complex.
Okay.
A fascination
Yeah.
with the forbidden,
Right.
with the allure of the supernatural,
And fairies with their connection.
to the wild, untamed aspects of nature.
Uh-huh.
Certainly embody that sense of
Yeah.
mystery and otherworldliness,
Right.
don't they?
They're both alluring
Yeah.
and potentially dangerous, making them all the more captivating.
Exactly.
And if you look closely at the spell itself,
Okay.
the scribe goes into great detail
Uh-huh.
about setting the stage for the encounter.
All right.
He describes the ideal atmosphere, the importance of cleanliness,
Okay.
even specifies.
Wearing clean, sweet-smelling clothes.
Wow.
It's almost as if he's creating...
A ritualistic space,
Okay.
heightening the sense of anticipation and
Right.
emphasizing.
The otherworldly nature of the encounter.
It's like he's trying to create a portal to the fairy realm.
Right there in his bedroom.
He's not just looking for a physical experience.
Right.
He's crafting an entire experience designed to transport him
Uh-huh.
beyond the mundane.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
And that ritualistic element
Okay.
is something we see echoed
Right.
in other magical practices of the time, like those demon summoning rituals
Yeah.
we discussed earlier.
Right.
It's all about creating
Okay.
a controlled environment,
Uh-huh.
invoking powerful forces,
Yeah.
and ultimately bending them to your will.
But hold on a second. We've talked about
Okay.
how dangerous fairies could be.
Right.
Wasn't the scribe at all worried
About the potential consequences. Yeah.
of dabbling in fairy magic?
I mean,
You hear those stories
Yeah.
about folks getting elf shot
right.
or driven mad?
By fairy enchantments?
He definitely acknowledges the risks.
Okay.
In fact,
The spells include numerous protective measures.
right.
He binds Lilia with the power of God,
Wow.
invokes various holy names,
Okay.
and makes sure she can't harm him
Right.
or anyone else.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's trying to have his fairy cake and eat it too.
So to speak.
He wants to enjoy the pleasure of the encounter
Fair.
while minimizing any potential downsides.
Talk about hedging your bets.
It seems like he's really trying to control every aspect of this
Yeah.
interaction,
Right.
both the pleasurable
Right.
and the potentially dangerous.
And that speaks to a fascinating paradox.
Okay.
We see throughout history
Yeah,
this human desire
right.
to control
Mm.
and experience the wild,
Yeah,
the untamed.
while simultaneously trying to minimize the risks.
Okay. We want the thrill, the excitement,
Right.
but we also crave
Yeah.
a sense of safety and security
It's like wanting to ride a roller coaster.
with a safety net underneath.
But all this focus
Yeah.
on the scribe and his desires,
Yeah.
it makes me wonder.
About the bigger picture
Okay.
we keep mentioning,
Uh-huh.
that these spells weren't written in a vacuum.
Right.
How do they fit into...
The broader cultural landscape of 17th century England.
What else was going on at the time
Okay.
that might have influenced these spells?
That's a crucial question.
And it takes us beyond the individual desires
Okay.
of the scribe
Right.
and into the realm
Yeah.
of social and religious upheaval.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about that blurring of lines
Yeah.
between fairies and demons?
Uh-huh.
Well, that reflects a time...
When beliefs about the supernatural
Okay.
were in constant flux.
It was a period of intense change.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
The Reformation was shaking up the religious landscape.
Mm-hmm.
The role of women in society
Right.
was being debated.
Yeah.
And there were those widespread anxiety.
About witchcraft and the power of the devil
All of that.
is simmering in the background
Yeah.
of these spells.
Okay.
They reflect a culture grappling.
With shifting beliefs and power dynamics.
So these spells aren't just a set of instructions.
For summoning a fairy lover,
Right.
there was like a snapshot
Yeah.
of a society in transition,
Uh-huh.
capturing those anxieties,
Right.
desires,
Right.
and struggles
Yeah.
of a particular moment in history.
It's almost like we're getting a glimpse
Right.
into the collective unconscious of the time.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And it challenges us to consider how our own beliefs and desires are shaped by the world around us.
Right.
What might seem strange or taboo to us today
Yeah.
was part of a complex and fascinating belief system.
In the 17th century,
It's a good reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles.
it's about understanding the lives
Uh-huh.
and beliefs
Yeah.
of real people
Right.
who lived in a very different world,
Than our own.
but even within those broader cultural currents.
We still see
Uh-huh.
the scribe's individual voice shining through.
Right.
It's those small details
Yeah.
that make these spells so compelling.
Uh-huh.
Those glimpses into his inner world.
For example,
Okay.
remember how he emphasized...
That Lilia was without doubt a woman.
That really stood out to me as well.
It almost felt like he was reassuring himself, and
Right.
maybe even the reader,
Right.
of her femininity.
It's as if he needed to make that distinction.
Even though he was talking about a supernatural being,
Yeah.
why do you think that was so important to him?
It's difficult to say for sure.
But it does make you wonder
Okay.
if there's something more
Yeah.
to that emphasis.
Right.
Perhaps it's tied to his personal experiences, his understanding of gender,
Okay.
or even some underlying anxieties
Right.
he might have had
Yeah.
about women and their power
It's almost like finding a secret diary.
hidden away in a dusty library.
Uh-huh.
We're getting this incredibly intimate look
Yeah.
at someone's beliefs,
Uh-huh.
desires,
Right.
and even fears.
Yeah.
And through those personal details,
We're learning about the broader world he lived in. Those
Right.
anxieties about female power.
right.
The blending of magic and religion.
Yeah.
And those deep-seated human desires.
For connection,
Uh-huh.
pleasure,
And
and
that-
control.
And what makes these spells
Yeah.
even more captivating
Okay.
is that they raise...
Far more questions than they answer.
Right.
We can analyze the language,
Uh-huh.
the symbols, the
Mhm.
historical context, but ultimately,
We're left wondering
okay.
what truly motivated the scribe.
Yeah.
What was he seeking
Right.
in this encounter with Lilia?
Was it purely physical? Uh-huh.
Or was there something deeper?
Something more profound driving him.
I think that's what makes this deep dive.
So fascinating. We're
Yeah.
not just learning about a set of spells.
Right.
We're exploring
Uh-huh.
the human condition itself.
The desire for connection,
Right.
the longing for something
Yeah.
beyond the mundane, the struggle for control
Right.
in a world that often feels...
Chaotic and unpredictable.
And perhaps that's where the true magic lies.
These spells might seem like a strange footnote in history,
Right.
but they offer us
Yeah.
a profound window into the past.
Reminding us
Huh?
that human desires and anxieties transcend time and place.
It really makes you think,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
These spells might seem like something...
Out of a fantasy novel,
Right.
but they're rooted
Yeah.
in very real human emotions
Oh, yeah.
and experiences.
Exactly.
And that's what makes them
Right.
so valuable to us
Okay.
as historians.
And I'd argue, as human beings trying to understand
Right.
ourselves and the world around us.
They offer us a unique opportunity
Okay.
to step back in time
Mm-hmm.
and glimpse the inner workings
Yeah.
of another person's mind.
And not just any person. Right.
Someone who felt compelled
Right.
to meticulously copy down these specific spells
Uh-huh.
onto this single sheet of vellum.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder.
What was going on in his life?
Right.
What led him to seek out this kind of encounter? Yeah,
Absolutely.
We can speculate about his motivations, but we'll never truly know the whole story.
And I think that's part of the beauty of history.
Okay.
It invites us to engage in this ongoing dialogue with the past, to piece together fragments of information, and try to make sense of them.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Where we only have a few pieces. But those pieces can tell us so much.
And sometimes the missing pieces are just as intriguing as the ones we have.
They spark our imaginations and encourage us to ask questions.
Speaking of questions.
As we've been exploring these spells, I keep coming back to that emphasis on Lilia being, without doubt, a woman.
Why was that so important to the scribe?
Yeah.
What was he trying to convey?
With that phrase.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I don't think there's a simple answer.
Okay.
But I wonder if it reflects a certain level of anxiety or uncertainty about the boundaries between the human and the supernatural.
Yeah.
Remember, fairies were often depicted
as shapeshifters, beings capable of taking on different forms.
So maybe by emphasizing Lilia's womanhood.
He was trying to establish a sense of familiarity, something recognizable in a realm that was inherently mysterious.
And unpredictable.
It's possible.
Or perhaps he was grappling with his own understanding of gender and sexuality in a society with very rigid definitions of those concepts.
We've talked about how fairies offered
a certain level of control and safety that human women didn't. Maybe this emphasis on her womanhood was a way of reconciling
those desires for both the familiar and the forbidden.
That's a really fascinating interpretation.
And it gets to the heart of what makes these spells so compelling. They force us to confront the complexities of human desire, the ways in which our longings and anxieties shape our interactions with the world around us.
So what does it all mean?
What can we take away
from this deep dive into the world of 17th century fairy magic?
I think these spells offer us a profound reminder that history is about more than just dates and events. It's about understanding the lives, beliefs, and desires of real people. Who lived in very different circumstances than our own.
And they challenge us to think critically about our own beliefs and assumptions. To recognize that what might seem strange or taboo to us today was once part of a complex and fascinating web of social and cultural norms.
These spells might be centuries old. But they speak to timeless human desires. The longing for connection, the pursuit of pleasure, the need for control in a world that often feels beyond our grasp.
They remind us that even in the face of uncertainty and change, humans have always sought ways to make sense of the world and their place within it. Sometimes through magic, sometimes through religion, and sometimes through a combination of both.
And just like the scribe,
who carefully copied these spells onto this single sheet of vellum. We're all searching for something, whether it's knowledge, power connection, or simply a glimpse of something.
Beyond the everyday.
And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson of all.
The human spirit's relentless quest for meaning. And its enduring fascination with the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach.
If these spells are about the human desire
for connection and control, how do we see those same desires
playing out in our own lives today? What are our modern-day fairy tales? What magic do we seek?
Even without the spells and incantations.
I think that's something worth pondering. As we emerge from this deep dive and return to our own world. A world that,
upon closer inspection, might be a bit more magical.
Then we realize